"Sign it now or we'll do it the hard way," Claire said, sliding the power of attorney across my kitchen counter, right where Margaret used to bake cookies with her. I stared at the paper, slick as a snake, while Evan thumbed through real estate apps like my house was already listed. But that wasn't even the worst part. They'd already filed for an emergency competency hearing behind my back, 10 days to erase my rights, my name, my life. She thought I'd roll over. She forgot who built this house with his bare hands. I may be 75, but I still remember where every receipt, every signature, and every camera is buried. And I promise you, by the time this ends, the only person packing a box won't be me. My name is Harold Whitaker, and I'm 75 years old. Each morning, I tend Margaret's roses and drink coffee on our front porch, the home we spent 40 years paying off, together. The sprinklers click on at 7 sharp, releasing that sweet scent of damp earth that Margaret loved so much. The third step still creaks under my work boots, just as it has since '82. My daughter Claire married Evan Turner, a slick downtown banker, and now she visits only to discuss estate planning and asset optimization. Her smile has gotten as cold as her husband's calculators. What she doesn't know is that I've kept every document, noted every date, and maintained lunch dates with my old friend Martin Reyes, a retired attorney from my Rotary days who never lost his razor-sharp mind. But let me start from the beginning. That Tuesday morning started like any other until Claire's Mercedes purred into my driveway at 9:30. I was pruning Margaret's yellow roses, the ones she'd planted along the fence the summer before she passed. "Daddy!" Claire called out with that sugary voice she uses when she wants something. I thought we could have a special day together. I set my pruning shears down, carefully wiping soil from my hands. You know that feeling when someone's about to pull a fast one on you? The air felt wrong, like before a storm. "Where to?" I asked, noting how she'd dressed up in one of her power suits, the kind she wore to close deals. "Just a little drive," she said, checking her watch. "I made an appointment. Now I may be 75, but I'm not slow." "Appointment for what?" "You'll see, it'll be wonderful." She practically herded me toward her car, where Evan sat tapping at his phone, barely bothering with a nod, hello. 20 minutes later, we pulled up to Brookside Retirement Home. My stomach dropped as I read the sign. The building stretched out like a beige prison, all neat hedges and wheelchair ramps. "Claire," I started, but she was already out, waving to a woman in scrubs. "Mrs. Turner, right on time." The nurse, Sandra, according to her name tag, beamed at us. "And this must be your father. I've worked construction most of my life. I know the smell of fresh paint covering old problems, and this place reeked of it." The corridors gleamed with that hospital shine, while perky posters promised active senior living at every turn. They'd tried to make it homey, but you can't fake that. Real homes smell like coffee grounds and yesterday's pot roast, not disinfectant. As we walked, Claire kept up a steady stream of concerned whispers to Sandra. "Been finding him a bit confused lately, sometimes forgets important dates." Each lie twisted in my gut like a knife. Meanwhile, Evan trailed behind, thumbing through something on his phone that looked suspiciously like real estate listings. "And this," Claire announced with theatrical flair, "is the secure memory care wing." She gestured toward a set of locked double doors, her smile sharp as broken glass. "Just in case things progress, you know." I did know. I knew exactly what she was doing. The drive home was quiet. We passed St. Michael's, where Margaret and I had married 52 years ago, where we'd baptized Claire, where we'd said goodbye to Margaret just 3 years back. Now, my own daughter was plotting to box up that life like old newspapers. "Think about it, Daddy," Claire said as she dropped me off. "Wouldn't it be nice to let someone else handle everything?" I waited until her car disappeared around the corner before I went inside. In the living room, Margaret smiled down from above the fireplace, that portrait from our 40th anniversary. She'd worn her favorite blue dress, the one that matched her eyes. My fingers traced the frame's edge, remembering how she'd laughed that day, saying the photographer made her look 10 years younger. Claire's words from last month echoed in my head. "You'll die alone in a nursing home." Not a threat then, a plan. Standing there in my own living room, everything felt different. The house Margaret and I had built our lives in, where we'd raised our daughter, where every scratch on the hardwood had a story. It wasn't just walls and a roof anymore. It was our legacy, and Claire wanted to liquidate it like a bad investment. I'm not a man who backs down easy. Never have been. But as I stood there, the afternoon sun streaming through windows Margaret had picked out herself, I knew I was in for the fight of my life. Claire had resources, connections, and youth on her side. All I had was truth and stubbornness, and a sneaking suspicion that might not be enough. 2 days. After that retirement home tour, Claire showed up unannounced during my lunch. I'd just finished making a sandwich, roast beef on rye, the way Margaret taught me. Simple food always tastes better when you're worried. Kitchen's better for this conversation, Claire announced, dropping her designer bag on my counter. Evan followed her in, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. They made quite a pair. Her in another power suit, him checking his phone like it might escape. You ever notice how your own kitchen can suddenly feel foreign? The room where Margaret and I had shared thousands of meals, where we'd taught Claire to bake cookies, now felt like a courtroom. "Daddy," Claire started, using that sugary tone she saves for closing deals. "We need to discuss your future." I took another bite of my sandwich, chewing slowly. Thought we covered that at Brookside. That was just the beginning. She pulled out a thick document, all neat tabs and sticky notes. "This is a standard power of attorney. Very routine at your age." My stomach clenched as she slid it across the counter. The paper felt slick under my fingers, like a snake. "It's for your own protection," she continued. "Given your recent confusion." What confusion would that be? Evan finally looked up from his phone. "Sir, it's a simple matter of asset management. Your home represents significant locked equity that could be better deployed." "You mean sold?" I cut in. Claire's smile tightened. "Daddy, be reasonable. This house is too much for you. Once we have proper control." "Control?" The word tasted bitter. "Of my house? My accounts? Sign now," she said, voice dropping. "Or we can do this the hard way. Emergency petitions get messy. Think eviction notices, competency evaluations." She let that hang. "There." Evan nodded along, already talking numbers. "Current market conditions suggest optimal liquidity options if we move quickly." "Get out." I stood up straight, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Daddy, both of you. Out of my kitchen." Claire's face hardened. "You're making a mistake. Wouldn't be my first." I pointed to the door. "Won't be my last." They left, Claire's heels clicking like ammunition on my hardwood floors. The sound echoed in my ears long after they'd gone. That evening, hands shaking slightly, I called Martin. We'd met through Rotary years ago, and even after retiring from law, he kept his mind sharp as ever. "Martin, got a minute?" "Harold? Everything okay?" He must have heard something in my voice. I told him everything. The surprise tour, Claire's whispered lies, the power of attorney. Tried keeping my voice down, but anger has a way of climbing. "Names," Martin said. "I need the nurse's name, the facility, dates, everything." I gave him what I had. The line went quiet except for his pen scratching. Then, "Harold, there's something worse." His voice dropped. "I just checked the county docket. Claire's filed for an emergency competency hearing. 10 days from now." The room tilted. 10 days? Thursday next week, 9 a.m. sharp. Judge Harrison's court. I grabbed my wall calendar. The one Margaret always insisted on keeping current. Red marker shook in my hand as I circled the date. "We need to move fast," Martin said. "Meet me tomorrow at dawn, my place. Bring every document you've got." "Right." My throat felt dry. "Martin, thank you. Get some rest, old friend. You'll need it." As I hung up, I noticed lights flicking on across the street. Mrs. Peterson's porch lamp, then the Hendersons. Word travels fast in old neighborhoods. They'd heard the argument with Claire. I moved through the house, checking locks. Each click felt final, like doors closing on the life I'd known. That red circle on my calendar seemed to pulse in the dim light. 10 days to save everything Margaret and I had built. Martin's house smelled like coffee and old books when I arrived the next morning. He had his dining room table cleared, ready for battle. Remember those war room scenes in the movies? It was like that, but with manila folders instead of maps. "First things first," Martin said, sliding a fresh cup my way. "We need Dr. Patel's evaluation. Recent one." I nodded. "Had my annual physical 3 weeks ago. Clean bill of health. Perfect timing. We'll need it signed and dated." He was already making notes. "How's your relationship with the neighbors?" "Good. Mrs. Alvarez brings me tamales every Christmas. Tom Rourke and I split garden supplies, share tools. People who see you daily then?" Martin's eyes lit up. Who can testify to your routines, your conversations? You know that feeling when pieces start clicking together? I did. Tom and I discuss the market every morning. Mrs. Alvarez, she's sharp as they come. We debate local politics through the fence. Martin's pen moved faster. We'll get statements from both, dated, signed, notarized. We spent that morning building our case. Dr. Patel's office opened at 9 and he didn't hesitate. Cognitive evaluation? He actually laughed. Harold's sharper than half my younger patients. The signed report went into our first envelope. Mrs. Alvarez was watering her flowers when we visited. Competency hearing. She set down her watering can, face darkening. That Claire, she thinks we're all blind? Last week you explained the new property tax amendments to me better than the newspaper. Tom Rourke was even more direct. That girl's gone money mad, he said, signing his statement. Yesterday you helped me recalibrate my sprinkler system, used percentages I couldn't even follow. Each document went into its own labeled envelope. Martin was methodical, everything dated and organized. I watched him draft our response to Claire's petition, his careful handwriting filling page after page. Looking solid, he said, but I heard the pause in his voice. But we're dealing with perception as much as facts. Claire knows this. He was right. That Sunday at St. Luke's proved it. I'd gone to early service like always, found my usual pew. But something was off. People who normally smiled now glanced away. Others whispered behind hymnals. Then I overheard Mrs. Bennet talking to the choir director. Claire says he wandered 3 blocks looking for Tuesday last week. Just heartbreaking. Heat crept up behind my ears. You know that hollow feeling in your chest when a lie about you takes flight, when you can't catch it to wring its neck. I haven't wandered anywhere, I said, probably too loud. Heads turned. Some faces showed pity, others embarrassment. That was worse than the whispers. Monday morning, we took our affidavits to the courthouse. Martin had everything in a leather briefcase, organized just so. The clerk, Jenny, had known me for years. Her kid used to mow my lawn. Mr. Whitaker, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. I should mention, Mr. Turner's firm filed some emergency motions this morning. Martin tensed beside me. On what grounds? Financial impairment, Jenny said, checking her screen. They're claiming irregular transactions, confusion over accounts. Right then, a young assistant wheeled past with a thick binder, headed straight for Judge Harrison's chambers. Evans' firm logo gleamed on the spine. I watched that binder disappear through the door. All that polished paper, those professional letterheads, those official-looking charts. My affidavit suddenly felt small. Martin, my voice was quieter than I meant it to be. Does truth beat presentation? He took a long, measured breath, the kind that says more than words ever could. Jenny called another name and we stepped aside. Martin's briefcase seemed heavier now, weighted with statements that might not be enough. Through the window, I could see Claire's car in the parking lot, sleek and confident in its reserved space. Martin and I set up a war room at my dining table. We needed a system, he said. Structure would keep us steady. Mornings for gathering proof, he explained, arranging files. Afternoons to rest and clear your head? He tapped his temple. Sharp mind needs good sleep. Made sense to me. Back when I ran my business, chaos never won against a solid schedule. Remember those old day planners, the ones with the leather covers? I still kept mine in the desk drawer. Habits die hard. That first morning, Dr. Patel's evaluation arrived by courier. Clean bill of health, cognitive functions, exemplary for any age. I could have framed it. Good start, Martin said, but his smile faded checking his phone. Claire just filed her own assessment. What assessment? Claims you saw some specialist last month. Dr. Warner? He squinted at the screen. Says you showed significant confusion during testing. My coffee went cold in my hand. I've never heard of Dr. Warner. Martin's pen tapped against his notepad. That's concerning. We pushed back. Got Randy, the church handyman, to document my volunteer work, maintaining the prayer garden. 3 years of detailed logs showing I'd handled the irrigation timing, seasonal rotations, supply ordering. All dated, all precise. Perfect, Martin said Wednesday morning. This proves consistent, complex planning. By afternoon, Evans' firm had dumped spreadsheets on the clerk, highlighting concerning patterns in my checkbook. Every regular donation to St. Luke's suddenly looked suspicious. every garden store. Receipt became evidence of confusion. You know what's strange? How quickly a home can stop feeling like one. Each morning I'd touch Margaret's portrait before starting our documentation push. But the frame felt different now. The whole house felt measured, assessed, like everything I'd built was being converted into dollar signs and liability notes. Friday afternoon, I trudged back from another courthouse visit. Another file denied, another delay granted. My shoes felt heavy on the porch steps. That's when I saw it, a courier envelope stuck in the screen door. Inside were photocopies, lots of them. Signatures on documents I'd never seen, but they all carried my name. Transfers, authorizations, releases, dating back months. "Martin," I said into the phone, "I need you to see these." He arrived as the sun was setting. I'd laid the pages across the dining room table, where his desk lamp now cast yellow circles on suspicious ink. Remember those old detective shows where they'd hunch over evidence late at night? That was us. Martin with his reading glasses, me with my second cup of coffee, both of us studying those signatures like they held secret messages. "Look here," he said, pointing with his pen. The date lines barely align, like they were added after. He kept tapping the pen, a slow rhythm matching my pulse. The house was dead quiet except for Margaret's wind chimes out back. Funny thing, there wasn't any breeze that night, but I heard them stir just once like someone had brushed past. Martin set down his pen, took off his glasses. 2 words came out like stones. "They're forged." I watched him reach for his laptop, fingers moving with new urgency. The desk lamp flickered. Old wiring. I should have fixed that years ago. My phone buzzed on the table, unknown number lighting up the screen. "Don't answer," Martin said, still typing. "Not until we—" But I was staring at those signatures. My name, over and over, written by a hand that wasn't mine. Each one a small theft. Each one a piece of me, copied and twisted into a weapon aimed at my own heart. The phone kept buzzing. The lamp threw shadows across those forged pages. And somewhere in the still night, Margaret's chimes stirred again without wind. The next morning hit me like a freight train of paperwork. Martin and I spread everything across my kitchen table, the real documents on the left, those forged monstrosities on the right. Each comparison dug the knife a little deeper. "Look at this one," I said, pushing my reading glasses up. "They've got me signing a transfer request on March 15th. I pulled out my leather-bound calendar, flipping to the date. I was teaching beginner woodworking at the community center that whole afternoon. 20 witnesses could verify it. "Good catch," Martin scribbled in his notepad. "What else?" I picked up another forgery, holding it to the window light. This notary seal, Sandra Bellinger, but she retired last December. I remember because she did my car registration renewal just before closing shop. The morning crawled by like that. Every fake signature we found seemed to have a twin waiting in the stack. Each one carried my name, but the strokes were all wrong. 30 years signing checks, you develop a rhythm. These signatures had none of that. Too neat, too practiced. "Here's another problem," Martin muttered, comparing 2 forms. "They've listed your address as 2441 Maple Street on this bank document from February. I've never lived on Maple Street." "Exactly." He added it to his growing list of discrepancies. "You'd think finding all these mistakes would boost our confidence. But watching Martin file objection after objection, only to see Claire's paperwork still dominating the court's docket summary, well, it started wearing on me. Around noon, I was rinsing out my coffee mug when I noticed my hands weren't quite steady anymore. The tremor wasn't age or illness. It was something worse, doubt. I dried my hands and walked into the living room where Margaret's chair sat empty by the window. The sunlight caught it just right, making the worn fabric glow like it used to when she'd sit there reading. "What am I doing, Margaret?" I whispered to the empty chair. "Maybe I'm being stubborn. Maybe I'm holding on to things too tight." Through the window I could see her garden. The roses were coming in strong this year, deep red blooms nodding in the breeze. Was I risking all that? Her memory, her legacy, just to prove a point? Martin's voice cut through my thoughts. "Harold, you still there?" I hadn't realized I was still holding the phone. "Yeah, sorry, just thinking. I've submitted a request for limited discovery," he said. "If we can get the judge to look at the original documents." "And?" My throat felt dry. The clerk says we're running out of time. They're pushing for a quick ruling. I walked to the kitchen calendar, that red circle glaring back at me. Below the date, I wrote 7 days in careful numbers. A week. That's all we had left to stop this runaway train. Martin, I said, staring at those numbers, what if the truth shows up too late? What if... The line went dead. I pulled the phone away, looking at the screen. No signal. When I tried redialing, it went straight to voicemail. Standing there in my kitchen, surrounded by papers that proved I was right, but somehow still felt like I was losing. I couldn't shake the weight settling onto my shoulders. Every document we'd found, every contradiction we'd spotted, they were all just drops in an ocean of Claire's momentum. I picked up one of the forged signatures again, studying how someone had tried to steal not just my name, but my whole life with careful strokes of a pen. The morning sun threw shadows across the false signature, and for a moment I could almost see Claire sitting at some desk, practicing my handwriting like she used to practice her spelling at the kitchen table all those years ago. The week before, the hearing crawled by like a wounded animal. You know that feeling when you're being watched but can't catch anyone looking? That's what it was like every time I stepped outside my door. At St. Luke's that Sunday, I sat in my usual pew, 3rd row, right side, where Margaret and I had settled 30 years ago. The whispers started before I'd even opened my hymnal. Mrs. Peterson, who'd brought me casseroles after Margaret passed, suddenly found the stained glass fascinating when I caught her eye. Dave Wilson, my poker buddy of 15 years, patted my shoulder with a "How are you holding up?" that dripped with pity. The grocery store was worse. I'd run into 3 of Evan's banking colleagues in the produce section. They, huddled by the avocados, trading knowing looks. One of them actually smirked when I fumbled counting change at checkout. My hands were steady. I was just distracted by their watchful eyes, but I knew how they'd spin it. "Did you see?" I imagined them reporting back to Claire. He could barely handle basic math. Every night I'd pull out Dr. Patel's letter from my bedside drawer. "Patient demonstrates complete cognitive clarity," I'd read aloud, tracing each word. "No signs of decline or impairment." 3 times through like a prayer, but it couldn't drown out Claire's voice in my head. "The facility has an excellent memory care wing, Dad." Facility. Such a sterile word for the place where they wanted to lock away what remained of my life. The evening before the hearing, I couldn't bear the silence anymore. I settled into Margaret's chair, the fabric worn smooth by years of her presence. Through the window, her roses swayed in the twilight breeze, and my throat tightened. "I'm sorry, Margaret," I whispered to the empty room. "I tried to keep our home safe, to protect everything we built together." My voice cracked. "But I'm losing it. Our daughter. She's too smart, too prepared. Maybe I really am just a foolish old man." The doorbell startled me from my confession. Martin burst in without waiting for an invitation, his breath coming fast like he'd run the whole way. He carried a thick manila file folder. "Harold!" he wheezed, dropping the file on my coffee table. "Look at this." I flipped it open. Bank statements, transfer records, corporate filings. My vision blurred as I tried to make sense of the numbers. "These are transfers from your account," Martin said, pointing to highlighted lines, "to something called Whitaker Consulting, LLC. My stomach clenched. "I never authorized—" "Of course you didn't, because this—" He pulled out another document. "This shows Claire registered that company 6 months ago. She's the sole manager." The room tilted as I followed the trail. 5,000 here, 8,000 there. Small enough to stay under radar, regular enough to look routine. My daughter hadn't just been trying to take my home. She'd been bleeding my accounts dry. "She's been stealing," I said, the words ashen in my mouth. Every line item felt like another betrayal, each transfer a knife in my back. Martin nodded grimly. "This changes everything. It's not just about competency anymore. It's fraud." I ran my fingers over the papers, reading dates and amounts until they blurred together. "Will it be enough for tomorrow?" "Maybe." Martin straightened his glasses. "But we need something ironclad. Something that proves beyond doubt. Who actually signed these transfers?" "What kind of proof?" My throat was desert dry. "Where would we even find that at this hour?" A slow smile spread across Martin's face. "Only where bankers forget the cameras." I stared at him, memories of Claire's barbed smiles and Evan's practiced sympathy swimming before my eyes. On the wall, Margaret's portrait watched us, and for the first time in days, I felt something other than despair, something with teeth. The next morning, Martin and I pulled into First Horizon's parking lot right as the clock hit 8. Through the tinted windows, I watched the branch manager unlock the front doors, flip the closed sign, and start another banking day like any other. Except this wasn't just any day. It was possibly my last chance to keep everything I'd spent a lifetime building. Remember those moments when your whole world narrows down to a single point? That's what it felt like, watching the second hand tick toward opening time. My wedding band caught the morning light, and I remembered slipping it on Margaret's finger in this same town, back when First Horizon was still Pioneer Savings and Loan. Martin gathered his briefcase, all business. Let me do the talking, Harold. Banking regulations are a maze. Inside, the familiar smell of coffee and paper hit me. The lobby hadn't changed much. Same burgundy carpet, same faux leather chairs where Margaret used to wait while I deposited my weekly paychecks. The tellers were new faces, but behind the desk sat Denise Fields, who'd helped me set up Margaret's memorial fund after the funeral. Her eyes brightened with recognition. "Mr. Whitaker, it's been a while." "Morning, Denise." I managed a tight smile. Martin stepped forward, credentials ready. "Mrs. Fields, I'm Martin Reyes, Mr. Whitaker's attorney. We need to discuss some urgent account activity." Denise's professional mask slipped into place. "Of course. Please step into my office." The office was small but neat, with family photos and service awards arranged just so. I sat stiffly while Martin laid out the bare bones, unauthorized transfers, forged signatures, today's hearing. He spread my ID and the court notice on her desk like cards in a high-stakes game. "We need to verify who actually conducted these transactions," Martin explained. "Your security cameras would show the signing parties." Denise's fingers drummed her desk. "Accessing archived footage requires corporate approval. It's policy." "We understand," Martin said smoothly. "But given the timeline, I'll escalate it to corporate security." She reached for her phone. "That's the best I can do." The waiting room clock ticked like a metronome while Denise made calls. I counted ceiling tiles, 48 full ones, 12 partial along the walls. Checked my watch so often the band started feeling like a handcuff. Through the window, I watched the sun climb higher, throwing shadows across the parking lot where Claire used to practice parallel parking in Margaret's old Volvo. The lobby filled and emptied twice before Denise's phone finally rang. She listened, nodding, taking notes. "Corporate can arrange a secure video link for the court," she said. "But they'll need a subpoena." Martin was already pulling forms from his briefcase. "How long for them to process once they receive it?" "They'll expedite it, given the circumstances." She glanced at my court notice. "But it has to be properly filed." The clock read 12:15. My stomach churned. "The judge recesses at 4, Martin muttered, pen flying across the subpoena form. "We'll need to file this immediately." I watched him write, each careful letter eating precious seconds. The courthouse was 10 minutes away in good traffic. The records window closed at 3. Every detail had to be perfect. One mistake, and Claire's lawyers would shred it apart. "Sign here," Martin said, sliding the form over. My hand shook slightly as I wrote my name. We thanked Denise and hurried out. The afternoon sun felt too bright, too cheerful for the knot in my chest. Martin's car coughed twice before starting. I swear my heart stopped both times. The courthouse parking lot was full. We had to circle twice before finding a spot in the far corner. Martin clutched his briefcase as we speed-walked through security, down the marble hallway to the records window. The clerk took our forms with the bored efficiency of someone who'd seen every kind of emergency. The printer hummed to life, spitting out confirmation pages. Then it made a sound like a cat choking on tinfoil. "Paper jam," the clerk announced. I stared at the half-printed page stuck in the machine's throat, thinking about Claire's smirk, about Margaret's roses, about everything hanging by this thin sheet of paper. The clerk poked at the printer with practiced moves, but each second felt like watching sand slip through my fingers. Martin and I hit the courthouse steps at 8:45 sharp. The subpoena stamp was still fresh in my pocket, and my phone showed corporate security's email. "Video feed confirmed for courtroom access." Simple words carrying the weight of everything. You ever notice how a courthouse feels different when you're fighting for your life? The marble's colder, The ceiling's higher, and every echo sounds like judgment. I'd been here before. Jury duty, property records, Margaret's will. But this morning my shoes squeaked against polished floors like they were trying to run on their own. The third-floor hallway buzzed with Claire's crowd, bank types in tailored suits, trading whispers, and meaningful nods. My daughter stood in the middle of it all, perfect in pearls and a navy dress that probably cost more than my first car. When she caught my eye, her smile didn't even pretend to reach her eyes. Evan lurked by the water fountain, head bent close to, their attorney. His whispers had the urgent rhythm of a man rearranging deck chairs while the ship takes on water. I watched him straighten his tie 4 times in 2 minutes. "Remember," Martin murmured, "let them talk first. They'll hang themselves." I nodded, trying to steady my breathing. The wood bench beneath me had the same worn smoothness as Margaret's garden spade handle. Funny how the mind grabs little things to stay anchored. I could almost hear her voice, patient as sunrise while teaching me about her roses. "Loosen the soil, not the roots, Harold. The roots know where they need to go. The roots know where they need to go." I ran my thumb over the subpoena in my pocket. At 9 sharp, the bailiff's voice cut through the murmur. "All rise, case number 2023 CV 4891 in the matter of Harold James Whitaker." The judge, Henderson according to the nameplate, looked like he'd seen every trick in the book and written a few chapters himself. He adjusted his reading glasses, scanned the room, and got straight to business. "Are all parties present and prepared to proceed?" Claire's attorney stood first. Thompson or Thompson, some name that probably cost 3 figures an hour. "Ready, Your Honor." Martin rose next, steady as a oak. "Present, Your Honor, though I must note for the record that this hearing was scheduled with minimal notice, only 10 days from filing." Judge Henderson's eyebrows twitched. "Noted. Please continue." "We've identified critical discrepancies in submitted documents," Martin said, "specifically regarding signatures on financial transfers. With the court's permission, we have arranged for real-time verification from First Horizon Bank's Security Division." Thompson surged up like someone had jabbed him with a pin. "Objection, Your Honor. This last-minute theatrical display is supported by proper subpoena," Martin cut in smoothly, holding up our hard-won paper. "The feed is ready at the court's convenience." Judge Henderson studied both lawyers, then nodded to his clerk. "Proceed." The courtroom monitor hummed to life, its screen still black. I folded my hands in my lap to keep them steady, focusing on that dark rectangle like it was the only thing in the world. Beside me, Martin arranged his notes with precise movements. Across the aisle, Claire's manicured finger tapped a slow rhythm on the table. Tap, 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 each sound like a countdown. I thought about the garden again, about how Margaret would spend hours watching a rosebud, waiting for the exact moment it decided to bloom. "Patience," she'd say, "is just trust taking its time." The monitor flickered and the tapping stopped. The monitor blinked, and there she was, my daughter, caught in the bank's unblinking eye. The timestamp matched our first flagged transfer, March 15th, 2:14 p.m. I remember that afternoon clearly because I'd been teaching Tom Rourke's grandson how to sand cabinet doors. Claire wore the same cream blazer she'd had on when she'd told me I needed more supervision. You know that silence that falls right before a storm? That's what filled the courtroom as we watched Claire stride up to the teller window, confident as sunrise. She pulled out her ID, just like she'd done a dozen times before, I'm sure, and reached for the withdrawal slip with a practiced motion. The camera angle caught every detail in crisp black and white. Her hand moved across the paper with that distinctive swoop she'd picked up in college, the same flourish she used to practice over and over when she was deciding how to sign her first credit card. Only this time she wasn't signing Claire Turner. The pen stroke spelled out Harold Whitaker in a decent copy of my own hand. Martin shifted beside me, laying out the transfer records like playing cards. Each page showed the same amount, $5,000 moving from my account to Whitaker Consulting LLC. My stomach clenched. How many times had she done this while I was tending Margaret's roses or fixing Mrs. Alvarez's porch rail? The second clip started without pause. April 3rd, different suit, same window, same signature that wasn't mine. I heard someone behind me whisper, "Jesus Christ." The flourish at the end of Whitaker was perfect this time, like she'd been practicing. Probably had. Judge Henderson leaned forward, his reading glasses catching the overhead light. "Miss Thompson, Approach with the original documents, please. His voice had that careful neutrality that experienced judges use when they've seen enough. And Mr. Whitaker, your current driver's license? My hands didn't shake as I pulled out my wallet. Funny how steady you get when the truth finally has its moment. I passed my license forward, watching it travel from hand to hand until it reached the bench. The judge studied the 3 signatures, my license, the transfer slips, and the frozen image on screen showing Claire mid-forge. He tapped a few keys and the monitor zoomed in until Claire's pen strokes filled the screen. Every loop and tail of her version of my signature stood out like a confession. Your Honor, Claire's voice cracked through the silence. She'd gone the color of old paper, her perfect makeup somehow making it worse. I'd like to request a brief recess to consult with... Denied. Judge Henderson didn't even look up from the documents. Ms. Thompson, would you care to address what appears to be documented fraud perpetrated by your client? The whispers behind the bar grew like wind through dry leaves. I caught fragments, forged her own father's, and all those times she said he was confused. Claire's attorney stood, smoothing her skirt with hands that didn't seem to know what to do. Your Honor, my client was acting with power of attorney. That's incorrect. Martin's voice cut through the excuse like a sharp knife through soft wood. No power of attorney was ever executed. We have Mr. Whitaker's sworn statement rejecting the document when it was presented. He slid another paper forward. In fact, that rejection was what precipitated this hearing. The judge set my license down with deliberate care. Ms. Turner, he addressed Claire directly now, making her flinch at her married name, are you prepared to explain these signatures? Claire's composure, that polished shell she'd worn like armor, cracked right down the middle. Daddy was being unreasonable about accessing his accounts, she blurted, then caught herself. I was trying to protect. Your Honor, her attorney interrupted quickly, we request a continuance to prepare a proper response to these allegations. Judge Henderson removed his glasses slowly. The look he gave Claire reminded me of my father when he'd caught me, trying to lie about a broken window. Miss Turner, you are exceedingly fortunate that this hearing is civil rather than criminal in nature, though that may change depending on what the bank decides to do with this evidence. The whispers crescendoed. Even Evan had backed away from Claire's chair, his face a mask of calculated distance. The ground was shifting all right out from under my daughter's designer heels. I stood as Judge Henderson cleared his throat. You know that moment when you can feel the weight of justice about to tip? When you've carried a burden so long your shoulders have forgotten what straight feels like? That was me, watching the judge's face harden into certainty. The court finds no credible evidence supporting the petitioner's claims of incompetency, he began, each word dropping like a hammer strike. Furthermore, the evidence presented today reveals deeply troubling conduct by Claire Turner, née Whitaker. My legs felt strange, like they might give or might hold, I couldn't tell which. Martin's hand touched my elbow, steadying me without seeming to. All emergency motions regarding Harold Whitaker's competency are hereby denied. The judge paused, letting that sink in. Full control of all assets and decisions remains with Mr. Whitaker, effective immediately. I heard Claire make a sound, something between a gasp and a protest. But her attorney gripped her arm before she could speak. Additionally, Judge Henderson continued, this court orders full restitution of all funds transferred under fraudulent authorization, with interest to be determined during forensic accounting. He turned his gaze directly to Claire. Given the nature of the evidence presented, this matter will be referred to the District Attorney's Office for review of potential criminal charges. The courtroom rippled with whispers. I remembered teaching Claire to ride her bike, holding the seat until she found her balance. Now I watched her sway in her chair, all that careful poise crumbling. Counsel will prepare for full forensic review of all accounts and transactions, the judge added. Miss Thompson, ensure your client understands the severity of these findings. He gathered his papers. We're adjourned. The bang of his gavel jolted through me like a starting gun. Suddenly I could breathe again, really breathe, not the shallow sips of air I'd been living on these past days. My hands stopped their trembling, settling into the calm they knew from decades of precise work. Claire stared at her attorney, makeup perfect but eyes wild. Evan, who'd backed his chair away from her during the ruling, studied the floor tiles like they held tomorrow's stock prices. Neither spoke, Neither looked my way. "All rise," the bailiff called, and we did, Claire's legs wobbling more than mine now. The double doors hadn't finished swinging before I heard it. "Mr. Turner," a woman with a press badge moved faster than the crowd. "Did you have knowledge of your wife's unauthorized transfers?" Martin's hand found my shoulder. "No comments at this time," he said, firm but not sharp. "Mr. Whitaker, let's use the east elevator." I watched Claire's back as she hurried ahead of us, her heels clicking desperate rhythms on the marble floor. Evan trailed several steps behind her, his phone already at his ear. The space between them looked like a crack growing into a chasm. The elevator dinged, and Claire stepped in first. I remembered her first day of school, how she'd gripped my hand until the last possible second before joining her class. Now, she pressed herself against the back wall, making herself small. The Claire who'd smiled while plotting to take my home, who'd forged my name without flinching, who'd tried to erase me from my own life. That Claire was gone. In her place stood someone I barely recognized, shoulders curved inward like she was trying to disappear. The doors slid closed on her face, and I felt something final in the sound. Outside, the courthouse steps stretched, down to the street where clusters of people stood talking in low voices. My hand found the iron railing, solid, steady, real. The morning sun hit the roses in the municipal planter boxes, and for a second they looked just like Margaret's blooms. But the murmurs rose around us like smoke. Neighbors who'd seen me at church, faces from the grocery store, even Tom Rourke's wife with her phone already raised. Their voices carried fragments that tangled in the air. His own daughter. Wonder what else they'll find. Bank's reputation. Martin's expression told me what I already knew. The courtroom victory was clean and complete, but out here in the real world, this story had legs. The whispers would run through our town like wildfire, leaving no corner untouched. The Sunday after the hearing, I walked into St. Luke's like I had every week for 40 years. Only this time, the familiar rhythm of greetings and handshakes stumbled. Heads turned, then quickly away. Whispers followed me down the center aisle like autumn leaves skittering across pavement. I took my usual spot, third pew from the front, Margaret's favorite because you could hear the choir perfectly, but still see the stained glass catch the morning light. Mrs. Peterson, who'd sat behind us for decades, suddenly discovered an urgent need to move to the other side of the church. You know that feeling when a room goes quiet the moment you enter. Multiply that by every conversation at coffee hour. I poured my usual cup, adding just a splash of cream like always, while Betty Martinez and her circle huddled by the cookies, their voices dropping to that specific pitch reserved for scandal. Can't believe she'd do that to her own father. And in a bank, of all places. Cameras everywhere these days. I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the cream make spirals. A memory hit me. Claire, at maybe 6 years old, standing on a kitchen chair to help me mix pancake batter, declaring herself the bestest stirrer ever. My chest tightened, but I pushed the image away. That little girl was gone. Tom Rourke caught my eye across the fellowship hall and raised his cup in a small salute. At least some friends stood firm. Monday brought its own kind of fallout. My phone buzzed during lunch. Denise Fields from First Horizon, her voice carrying that careful tone bank managers use when lawyers might be listening. "Mr. Whitaker, I wanted to confirm we're fully cooperating with the investigation. All footage and transaction records have been secured." She paused. "And you might want to know that Mr. Turner submitted his resignation this morning. Pending personal matters," the memo said. I thanked her and hung up, thinking about Evan's perfect suits and practiced smile. Wonder how that superior smirk looked now, turning in his office keys. The afternoon light slanted through my study window as I sorted through the hearing documents. Each paper found its proper sleeve. Dr. Patel's evaluation, the neighbor statements, Martin's brilliant motions. My fingers lingered on the bank transfer records that had turned the Teinheide. Such simple numbers on a page, but they'd revealed the truth like lightning splitting a dark sky. I labeled everything carefully, just as I always had. Maybe that's what Claire never understood. How keeping order wasn't about being fussy, but about respecting what matters, about being ready when life tests your word against someone else's. The door chime rang, just as I was finishing. Through the front window, I saw Bill Cooper from across the street, holding a casserole dish. His wife made the best chicken pot pie in 3 counties, and they'd never missed bringing one when someone needed comfort. Only this time, I wasn't grieving a loss. I'd won, but maybe they understood that victory could leave its own kind of ache. I met him at the door and we exchanged few words, just the dish, a firm handshake, and that look men give each other when they want to say more, but no silence. Says it better. As he headed back across the street, he turned and lifted 2 fingers in a quiet salute. I nodded, grateful for neighbors who knew the difference between gossip and support. Evening settled in as I stood at my front gate, key in hand. The roses Margaret had planted caught the last sunlight, their petals glowing like memories made real. I pulled out my phone and sent Martin a quick text. Home next. His reply came fast. Thumbs up emoji, and don't forget to change that alarm code. I smiled. Trust Martin to think of practical details even now. The key felt different in my hand, heavier somehow, more significant. This wasn't just unlocking a door anymore. This was crossing a threshold I'd defended with everything I had. Every click of the lock's tumblers reminded me. Earned, not assumed. I drew a deep breath and turned the key, ready to face whatever echoes of the past few weeks still lingered in the front hall. Morning came like it always had, softly at first, then all at once. I opened the front door and let the sunrise pour in, watching dust motes dance through shafts of light that pooled across Margaret's rose petals. Some had fallen overnight, scattered like nature's confetti across the welcome mat. You know those moments when the world feels so right, you can almost hear it click into place. This was one of those. The kitchen tiles felt cool under my feet as I moved through my morning routine. Measured water, fresh grounds, the gentle gurgle of the coffee maker. These simple sounds filled the space like music. You'd be amazed how peaceful ordinary things can feel after weeks of chaos. I set my mug down exactly where Margaret used to spread her seed packets each spring, planning the garden like a general plotting a campaign. The ceramic clinked against the worn wood, and I couldn't help but smile. Some victories don't need a brass band or a newspaper headline. Sometimes they're as quiet as coffee steam rising in morning light. The garden drew my eyes through the window, Margaret's roses standing proud against the lattice. Claire had wanted to tear all that out, turn it into marketable curb appeal, whatever that meant. Now those blooms had outlasted every scheme and signature, just like their keeper. Funny thing about karma, it doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, spreading through coffee hours and boardrooms like morning dew. Claire's legal defeat was just the beginning. The restitution orders would sting her wallet, sure, and that fraud inquiry hanging over her head would keep her lawyers busy. But reputation, that's the kind of thing money can't fix. I heard it in the way conversations stopped when she passed the grocery store checkout, saw it in how the church ladies suddenly found their phones fascinating whenever she approached. Even her country club crowd, the ones who used to hang on her every word about investment strategies and property values, they developed a sudden interest in their shoes whenever she spoke. And Evan? His resignation letter might have cited personal matters, but everyone knew what that meant. Banking's a business built on trust, and he'd lost that faster than a cat loses patience. Last I heard, he was exploring opportunities elsewhere. Corporate speak for nobody's returning my calls. You want to know the real measure of their fall? It wasn't in the court records or the bank statements. It was in the silence, the way nobody defended them, the way their so-called friends suddenly couldn't remember their phone numbers, the way their carefully built social castle crumbled without a sound. The coffee warmed my hands as I stood there, watching bees visit the roses. Margaret always said you could tell the health of a garden by how many bees it attracted. They know where the good things grow, she'd say, penciling notes in her garden journal. The memory settled around my shoulders like a comfortable old jacket. Each room I passed through felt different now, more solid, more mine. Not because of any paper a judge signed, but because every inch had been defended and kept. The living room where Margaret's portrait hung, the study with its neat files that had helped win the day, the kitchen where I'd refused to sign away my life. Each space held its own quiet victory. The silence filling these rooms wasn't the heavy kind that comes with loss. It was the peaceful kind, like the quiet after a storm when you know your roof held strong. Every creak of the floorboards, every tick of the old mantel clock seemed to say the same thing. This is Harold Whitaker's home. I took another sip of coffee, letting the warmth spread through my chest. Through the window, morning sun blessed Margaret's roses, painting them in shades of victory. My hands were steady on the mug, just like they'd been steady signing those bank documents all those years ago. Just like they'd been steady. In court. The words came without effort, calm and certain as sunrise. They mistook my age for weakness.